1. The silence after the storm. It doesn't begin with peace, it begins with quiet confusion. After you cut off your family, the world doesn't explode, it just stops making noise. The phone is still, the familiar arguments fade. The background tension that once felt unbearable suddenly disappears. And for a moment, you think this is what freedom must feel like. But it's not freedom yet, it's absence, the space left behind when chaos ends. And silence, for the first time, becomes both comforting and cruel. Because in that silence, you start hearing yourself again. And that's when the real reckoning begins. 2. The weight of relief. People imagine relief as light. It isn't. It's heavy because it comes wrapped in guilt. You feel calmer, but the calm feels wrong. You find peace, but your mind calls it betrayal because the body is finally relaxed, but the conscience, the one shaped by years of obedience and endurance, can't understand why peace feels like danger. You scroll through your phone out of habit, half expecting their name to appear. It doesn't, and you feel something you can't explain. Not regret, not joy, just a strange kind of stillness. That stillness is what happens when survival mode ends, but healing hasn't begun. 3. The echo of loyalty. You were taught that family is sacred, that endurance is moral, that walking away means you failed. But no one tells you that loyalty, when misused, becomes a leash. You stayed long after the love became conditional. You convinced yourself that patience was strength, when in truth it was fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being the one who finally says enough. And even now, after you've walked away, the echo of that old loyalty still haunts you. It whispers in moments of weakness, go back, maybe they've changed. But deep down, you know the only thing that changed was you. 4. The mind's rebellion. The brain doesn't know how to mourn the living. It keeps replaying the same moments, searching for a version of the story that doesn't hurt. You imagine different endings, softer ones, ones where they finally see you. But psychology is merciless in its honesty. Closure rarely comes from others. It comes from acceptance. The nervous system doesn't want fairness, it wants safety. And when love begins to feel like danger, the mind has no choice but to protect itself. Cutting them off wasn't cruelty, it was biology. It was survival wearing the mask of selfishness. 5. The ghost of guilt. Guilt arrives like a slow drip, not when you leave, but when you start to heal. You catch yourself laughing or sleeping better or breathing easier, and guilt whispers, how dare you feel okay? You mistake recovery for abandonment. You think peace is something you must earn, but guilt isn't proof you did something wrong. It's proof that you were conditioned to believe love must hurt. And now that it doesn't, the mind is confused. You're not guilty, you're detoxing from a lifetime of emotional debt. 6. The loneliness that follows. No one prepares you for the quiet ache that comes after the decision. Even when it's right, it feels unnatural. There's no ritual for this kind of loss. No funeral, no goodbye speech, no socially approved grief. You just wake up one day and realize the story continued without you. You see old photos and wonder if they miss you. You wonder if they tell people you changed, or if they pretend you never existed. And yet, under all the wondering, there's one truth you can't escape. You didn't leave because you stopped loving them. You left because you finally started loving yourself. 7. The rebuilding. At first, the distance feels like floating. No anchor, no direction. You start questioning who you are without the roles you played for years. The responsible one, the quiet one, the peacemaker, the scapegoat. It feels like losing your reflection. But over time, something subtle happens. You begin to rebuild identity not through opposition, but through authenticity. You start liking things you didn't have permission to like. You say no and survive it. You exist without apology. And in that small, quiet freedom, you begin to see that what you lost was never love. It was approval dressed as connection. action. 8. The redefinition of family. Family stops being a noun, it becomes a verb. It's no longer about shared blood, it's about shared safety. You learn that love without empathy isn't love, it's control. You learn that connection without respect isn't closeness, it's captivity. And you start building something new, with friends who listen, with people who don't rewrite your reality, with spaces where your calm doesn't feel like rebellion. It's not about replacing anyone, it's about redefining what home feels like inside your body. 9. The return of compassion. At some point, the anger fades, not because you've forgiven everything, but because you've outgrown the need to keep proving your pain. You stop analyzing who was right. You start understanding why they couldn't see. You realize generational pain doesn't vanish. It transfers until someone refuses to carry it. And that someone was you. So you stop trying to win, you start trying to understand. And understanding, not revenge, becomes your closure. 10. The new self. After you cut off your family, the story doesn't end. It transforms. You stop being the character written by others and start becoming the author of your own piece. You no longer chase validation. You no longer shrink to fit. You start to feel something strange, not joy, not pride, but stability, the kind that doesn't depend on permission. You begin to see that the distance wasn't separation, it was space, the kind that allows you to breathe, to grow, to return to yourself. 11. The final truth. Healing isn't about forgetting them, it's about remembering yourself. You may never get an apology, you may never hear the words you needed, but you no longer need them to move forward because you finally understood something most people never do, that choosing peace over loyalty isn't betrayal, it's evolution. And evolution is never painless, but it is freedom, quiet, steady, sacred freedom. And that's what waits for you after you cut off your family. The quiet reconciliation. One day, without warning, the pain stops demanding attention. You stop checking the wound to see if it's still there. You stop rehearsing speeches you'll never give. Instead, you start understanding that forgiveness isn't something you offer them, it's something you offer yourself. Because holding on was never loyalty, it was self-punishment disguised as love. And the moment you release the need for closure, you realize something sacred. You were never waiting for them to change. You were waiting to meet the version of yourself that no longer needs their permission to be whole. The life after. After the storm, life becomes quieter, but also more real. You laugh differently now. You rest without guilt. You choose with intention. You no longer chase belonging, you build it. And the love you give is no longer desperate, it's deliberate. The world doesn't look the same because you no longer see it through someone else's reflection. You've stopped surviving your story and started living your truth. That's not a happy ending, it's an honest one. And honesty, finally, feels like home. The integration. Eventually, the past stops feeling like a place you visit. It becomes part of your map. You stop dividing your life into before and after. The pain that once defined you turns into context, not identity. You no longer flinch at the memory. You learn from it. Every scar becomes a sentence in your story, not the ending, but evidence that you healed honestly. And when people ask what happened, you no longer need to explain, because peace doesn't need witnesses. It only needs truth, quietly lived, consistently chosen.